Thanks for the update, Tim. This past weekend, the Niagara Parks Commission hosted a ceremony of remembrance, recognition, and respect for the contributions of Indigenous veterans. It took place, fittingly enough, at the Landscape of Nations Memorial located at Queenston Heights.
We gather today to acknowledge and honor the contributions and sacrifices Indigenous nations made to the defense of freedom of these lands and country now known as Canada. To have a legacy space that creates a destination, an environment for the examination and understanding of Indigenous history. And so it all comes together based on all the elements that are part of this public artwork, and then the location, which has really historical significance. It is the battle site of the Battle of Queenston Heights from the War of 1812. And it also, the other thing we know that has worked out really well is there's a dialogue now between the Brock Monument and the Landscape of Nations Memorial. So we are able now to tell the full story of this history, really an important formative era in Canada's history that had significant Indigenous contributions. Here, on these hallowed grounds of the Battle of Queenston Heights on October 13, 1812, Indigenous war captains John Norton and John Brant, along with Thomas Davis, Aaron Hill, and David Davids, led a force of Haudenosaunee, Delaware, and other Indigenous warriors that repulsed an American attack and set the tone for a geopolitical conflict that would last another 2.5 years.
This year represents the third annual Valour and Victory ceremony and also the 5th anniversary of the unveiling of the Landscape of Nations Memorial.
It's got deep connections into Indigenous culture. There's some elements in here that reflect the relationships between the Indigenous people and the British government, as well as Canada's government. And it highlights some of those relationships within some of those symbols that are within this monument. So it's a good tie-in to their original relationships, and as well as the military relationships and alliances that were created as well.
This solemn service was held on the sacred grounds where Six Nations and Native allies fought alongside their British and Canadian compatriots throughout the War of 1812.
I'm Sergeant Ray Starks. I'm from Chiging First Nation, Manitoulin Island. It's my pleasure to be here today. I represent the current members, Indigenous members of the Canadian Armed Forces. For so long, these sacrifices were never honored. Usually when Remembrance Day rolls around, what's usually at the forefront is usually the wars when we were part of the Commonwealth is, World War I to Korea, other operations that we've done, Afghanistan, They usually don't go far back enough to when the country was fighting for its very existence, its right to exist. So, the Americans thought it was just a matter of marching in order to take over Canada, Upper and Lower Canada at the time. If it wasn't for the militia, the British that were here, and especially the Indigenous forces that were here, we wouldn't be waving the Canadian flag now.
You have to really understand the strength of those alliances that existed here prior to, then through the War of 1812. Very strong alliances had been established over generations between the Crown, British leadership, and various Indigenous nations. And the Indigenous nations took these alliances and relationships very seriously. And it's because of that, that's what you heard, how that recognition of still assisting and working with the British folks, new Canadians, how that continued to move throughout history.
Sacrifices here laid a legacy for the current soldiers in the Canadian Armed Forces. Being here on this land, it's hallowed land. It's an honor to be here.